Watchers in the fourth dimension.
He will do what he says. His logic is impaired by irrational sentiment.
I thought you said external appearances weren't important.
If you're supposed to be the superior race of the universe, why don't you try climbing after us?
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Riley. And, oh look, rocks!
This episode, we're kicking off Season 17 with the return of everyone's favourite Pepper Potts in Destiny of the Daleks. But before we get into that, Julie is going to take a quick look at the mail. Over to you, Julie.
So our mail today is mostly, actually all of it, is going to be about the power of Kroll. Dan Boris says, Power of Kroll, what can I say about this episode? Looking forward to your next episode.
Nice.
Next, from Beardo Beatnik. Thanks again for another fun episode. You three are so fun to listen to. Oh, it's so nice. Of course, we must all worship Kroll. It is our moral duty.
Nice. Very nice.
6 out of 10. Cheap, rubbery tentacles.
Love that.
Arl Gray says, Hey Watchers, a long time no check-in. I agree with you. Not too much to love here. Pretty bog standard, pun absolutely intended, who outing. Nevertheless, as a swamp fan, I dig the marsh setting. I'm always in for a colonization resource exploitation commentary. It's nice to see John Leeson in front of the camera, and there are some charming performances and bits. Hey Julie, I actually like the Doctor providing incidental music with his reed flute. 5 methane blasts out of 10. Now, Alan Seiler had to put this one immediately next because he says, Julie, I'm in total agreement with you. It drives me absolutely bonkers when musical instruments are portrayed inaccurately, and that was the problem. Case in point, in the music battle in the Devil's Chord, the maestro is wailing away on a single timpani but producing 2 different tones. That's not how a timpani works. I love it, Alan. Thank you so much. Other than that, I actually don't dislike Kroll at all. I mean, it's not great, and it's definitely the weak link in this particular chain, but I don't think it's all that bad. I'll award it 6 reed flutes out of 10. He also did say, I had to make a trip to Florida to deal with my father's impending death. I saved this episode to listen to on the drive down. Hearing your voices and your humorous takes on the story made the dreary 9-hour drive a bit more bearable, so thank you.
Firstly, Alan, we're so sorry for your loss.
Absolutely.
I know that's really tough, and we're honoured that listening to us made that drive a little bit better, so thank you for those kind words.
Absolutely.
All right. Our friend Adam Wright says, I'm allergic to shellfish, and apparently I'm allergic to Kroll. I just never liked this one. Again, Holmes makes it clear he believes women should be screaming or never heard. Has to be over 30 dudes in the story and just marry Tam. You're not wrong. Lucky K9 wasn't used because he would have had a field day doing nut shots. I did enjoy Neil McCarthy as Thawne. Overall, I give this 4 out of 10 little green men with cornrow braided wigs. Tony Monticello says, I've watched it several times, and yet I never remember much about it beside green dudes in loincloths jumping up and down yelling Kroll while a giant squid thing looms in the horizon. Was Baker in this? I don't recall. Good stuff.
That's about accurate. That's a pretty good short summary.
I really like that one. Our friend J.M. Casey says, I was so sure the little teaser clip in the intro was going to be a bunch of dudes raggedly yelling Kroll while iconically beating on a drum. Yeah, well, sorry, we didn't do that. Anyway, this story has a really bad reputation, I guess, but I've always kind of liked it myself. Interesting. It's arguably not the most dynamic or fun script. In fact, it's almost bizarrely angry. Tom Baker is starting to goof off a bit, but there's just something about it. Maybe it's the setting, and yeah, the huge monster that's just there to be a huge monster, and a supporting cast that at least has a bit of personality. That's always just worked for me. Not the best of what is turning out to be a pretty strong season overall, but not my least favorite either. Interesting. There's a few that say it's not too bad.
They all seem to be coming in around 5.5 or 6, which is not terrible.
Yeah.
We've had much, much worse.
Yes, we have.
Kieran James Evans says, look, it's not great or even particularly good, but there are decent bits in here. Yes, and it's that we should focus on. There's nice dialogue, and the Kroll effects are far from the worst the show has. That is absolutely true. Weak, but not terrible. 5 out of 10 holidays that Bob Holm needs. Nick Rutherford says, agreed, this is pretty ropey, but there are still some things to enjoy. The night filming is good. Okay, yeah. And like you, I enjoy the bit where you think Romana is being menaced by a man in a dodgy monster suit, and it turns out it's meant to look like a man in a dodgy monster suit. Very meta. 4 farts out of 10. Then David Patty says, listening to you on the Power of Crawl is more fun than watching the story. It's just kind of there, and although I do like the giant monster idea, Holmes just doesn't do enough with Kroll or the whole situation. Can't help comparing this to a story early in the next Doctor's run, which has the same elements handled with loads more of subtlety. As I was listening, though, the thought occurred to me, RTD has now established that Sutekh is hanging off the TARDIS at this point, and I imagine him looking across the marshlands at the giant vegetable and saying, "Ah, Kroll, I welcome you to the Pantheon. You shall be the god of farts."
Nice.
5, K9 needs a motorboats out of 10. And last but not least, Austin D. Patterson. Whenever I'm watching season 16 and I come to Power of Crawl, I can't help but laugh. Not because of the cheap effects, but because in this story, you've got some absolute titans of the show creating a meh Doctor story and obviously not having fun doing so. You've got Professor Solon, Barnum, and K9 talking about methane mining and general moral duty painted in green makeup worshipping a giant SFX nightmare. Not to mention Robert Holmes. Enough said there. This story stops the fun and inventiveness of season 16 in its tracks with the tropes we've grown tired of, but there still are some moments that shine. 5 out of 10 angry Philip Maddox. And that, my friends, is the mail.
All right, thank you, Julie. And as a reminder, dear listeners, we really do love getting your feedback, thoughts, comments, and questions. And as you've just heard, we do try to read out as many of them as possible on the show. So please do get in touch. As always, you can contact us through Facebook, Instagram, and X at Watchers4D, or you can email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. Additionally, we would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast if you're not already doing so, and if you dropped us a review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. Both of those things really do help the show. Anyway, to Destiny of the Daleks and heading behind the scenes. When Graham Williams became the show's producer at the end of 1976, he made a very deliberate choice to avoid using any recurring monsters right away. The Daleks had last been seen in Season 12's Genesis of the Daleks, which was their 4th appearance in as many years, and Williams felt that they were less effective when they were overused. He apparently didn't realize that they were less effective when they were written by Terry Nation. Anyway, by late 1978, when Williams and new script editor Douglas Adams were planning the show's 17th season, Williams decided that it was time for the Daleks to make a return. He approached Terry Nation to discuss their return in the season premiere. Nation had not contributed to the show since season 13's The Android Invasion in 1975. However, since then, he'd been heavily involved with creating Blake 7 and basically writing all of the first season and continuing his involvement in the second season, and he had even gone as far as to suggest that the Daleks might appear in that show.
Oh.
Dear Lord. Nation agreed to the Daleks featuring in a new Doctor Who story, as long as he wrote it. However, his commitments on Blake 7 meant that he wouldn't be able to complete the scripts before the start of the show's 17th recording block. Rather than lose the opportunity to have the Daleks open the season, Williams rearranged the production order, and so the Dalek serial would be 3rd in production order, but would remain the season opener at broadcast. Destiny of the Daleks was formally commissioned on December the 20th, 1978, and Williams and Adams suggested that Nation draw upon a short story, apparently written by Isaac Asimov, about 2 armies, each reliant upon a battle computer that was logically unable to outwit its counterpart. Nation, on his side, wanted to completely unnecessarily bring back the character of Davros, creator of the Daleks, who he had been careful to depict as being defeated but not destroyed at the end of his debut appearance in Genesis of the Daleks. He was also adamant that K9 be sidelined, lest the robot dog upstage the Daleks. The ego has landed, ladies and gentlemen. Adams made several contributions to the scripts, most notably the sequence depicting Romana's regeneration. Mary Tam had decided not to return to the show, and by the time filming was occurring, she was noticeably pregnant and unable to do the scene. Adams decided to write the regeneration as a parody of Baker's Doctor trying on different costumes in Robot, but with different bodies instead of outfits. This scene obviously represents the first appearance of Lala Ward as Romana, who'd been cast on the recommendation of Mary Tam, and it follows her appearance as Princess Astra in the previous story, The Armageddon Factor. Adams also contributed the scene in which the Doctor taunted the Daleks about their inability to follow him up a vertical shaft.
Yes!
Incidentally, Terry Nation hated that scene because he thought it made the Daleks seem less threatening.
Well,
We can get into that later. Assigned as director, we have Ken Grieve, who is also known for his directorial work on The Omega Factor, Coronation Street, Bugs, and CI5, The New Professionals. One issue that Grieve had to deal with was the deteriorating condition of the Dalek props. The budget would permit some refurbishment, but not new construction. As such, one Dalek was made up of elements left over from the 60s, another was composed of the Goon components from Planet of the Daleks, and one was a mixture of both. A fourth Dalek was put together with the top section of a Goon Dalek and an unusually symmetrical skirt section which had been built in 1978 for use at travelling exhibitions. There were also 6 immobile vacuum-formed Daleks for use in long shots and scenes in which a Dalek needed to be destroyed. Grieve also had to deal with the fact that Michael Wisher, who had previously played Davros, was touring with a play in New Zealand and so was unavailable to reprise the role. Grieve cast David Goodison in his place. However, the Davros mask had been specifically designed for Michael Wisher, and it didn't fit Goodison. So, the section around the mouth had to be removed and makeup applied to Goodison's chin in order to make it work. The mask, costume, and travel unit were also in various states of disrepair, having been put on display at various exhibitions and suffering the associated wear and tear that you would expect. Joining Grieve's behind-the-scenes team, we have the obvious returns of Dudley Simpson as composer and John Nathan Turner as production unit manager.
John Nathan Turner of John Nathan Turner Overdrive.
Indeed. Indeed. Is it even Doctor Who at this point if you don't have those two? As designer, we have Ken Ledsham returning for the second time. He previously worked on Season 16's The Reboss Operation. And as costumer, we have the return of June Hudson, who also previously worked on Season 16's The Reboss Operation. Of note, since the last time we spoke about her, she made a cameo in The Devil's Cord from the most recent season of the show, as the old lady in the window. During filming, a Steadicam was used for the first time, allowing dynamic shots across the uneven ground of the 2 quarries that were used without destabilizing the picture. The Steadicam was a relatively new invention and only a few are available in Britain, and this was one of its first uses on British television, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, the finished serial started airing on September the 1st, 1979 at 6:10 p.m. and was, as usual, broadcast on consecutive Saturdays. Before we discuss the story, the short summary is with me this episode, and I will warn you, I am going to be quite scathing here. Terry Nation, who our fallen comrade Don once described as his favourite hack, returns to the show for the last time, and boy is this one a hack job. Not only did he shamelessly rip off the first episode of the first Dalek serial for basically the entire first episode of this serial, he still tries to hit us with a surprise Dalek cliffhanger in a story that the title sequence tells us is called Destiny of the Daleks.
And other things, yes.
For 3 more episodes, we're assaulted with Terry Nation cliches, the Daleks facing off against another robotic species, the needless return of Davros, and the Daleks using slave labor. There's a little radiation thrown in there just for good measure. And of course, the Doctor saves the day by defeating the Daleks, Davros, and the Movellans, and the slave workers head off to take Davros to stand trial. Still, at least this one has some humour in it, courtesy of new script editor Douglas Adams, otherwise it really would be a total waste of time. Let's talk about it, part 1. Actually, let's talk about that first, because this episode, unusually, is billed in episodes and not parts.
Oh.
For the first time in a while. Anyway, that's a weird little nitpicky thing. I don't know why. Nothing has talked about it. It just is. So, not part 1, episode 1.
Guess we should talk about the Romana switch.
Yes, we should.
I don't know how I feel about this Romana, to be perfectly frank.
All right, but before we even get there...
Let's discuss how it was done.
Yes.
My main question is, okay, we established that she's regenerating, fine, but why? Why is she regenerating? What
Because
happened?
none of your fucking business, that's why.
That's about it. It's because why not? And that's always the sign of very good writing right there.
Because Mary Tam was pregnant and they didn't know how else to deal with it. This is called production team didn't have a plan. Shit, make something up and don't explain it.
They could have had like a one-liner of, oh man, can you believe that thing happened? And oh, you got hurt. You know, like just...
You're right. There was an opportunity for maybe a humorous discussion about an adventure they had in between the seasons that explains it. That would be left up to the audience's imagination. That would be nice. Nah.
Anything would be nice. I did like the switching bodies thing. That kind of was very fun in a very odd way. I really liked the tall one. That was really fun.
I mean, Tom Baker is a tall man as well, so that woman must have been gargantuan in height.
Or they just did a camera trick with her.
Maybe.
Looked like they had done a cut before he then moves over and then looks up. So they could have put her on a pedestal or shot him lower. It's a lot of options there. I did not care for this part. As Julie pointed out, it's just, there's no reason. Give us some sort of reason. I don't even care if it's a joke reason.
Well, she's clearly fixated on the Princess Astra body because she gives us that on 3 separate occasions. I do kind of like when she shows up in the Doctor's costume, and then the final version of the costume is the same thing, but in different colors.
I've got to say, the pink coat, oh, fabulous. That is fabulous. I will say that Romana, in whichever form she's in, I feel like she's going to be stylish either way. She had much better judgment on shoes this time. I will say that. But I think I liked the snarkiness of Mary Tam, and I didn't quite get this with this Romana.
Give her time. Give her time. I think she'll come good.
While we're on this discussion, does anyone else feel like we deserved a establishing scene as to Romana deciding or the Doctor deciding to continue to travel together despite their Key of Time mission having wrapped up?
I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, yeah, that might have been nice, but I guess she's learning a lot and quite likes traveling with him. But yeah.
Well, it's just kind of interesting to me because that could have provided your solution of no Mary Tam. You just move forward. I mean, I guess they felt like they couldn't do a goodbye off screen, so they do a regeneration, sort of, so to speak, off screen instead.
Yeah.
I guess one's better than the other. I don't know. And I'm just trying to figure out what the motivation is for Romana now that the mission is over. Like, wasn't she doing something before she was assigned to the Doctor?
Although she does realize that she wasn't really assigned by the President of the Time Lord. She was kind of tricked into it by the White Guardian.
Right.
So it would have been nice, but it is what it is. I'm glad she's still here. I think that's the joy of having a Time Lord, is if the actress or actor does decide to leave, they can just cast someone else. But yeah, it's not done well.
And then the other part that just adds to the uncomfortableness is the Doctor taking out K9's brain. Just to set the stage, you have this scene, first scene of the season, no Mary Tam as Romana. You don't know what's going on with that. And K9 is in the chop shop. There seems to be no place to put your basis on from where you were just last season, in the last episode.
Yeah.
And they absolutely do not touch upon the whole Key of Time, really. It's just like, okay, cool, we're doing something else. What? Okay.
It's a new beginning. And they just didn't want to... I don't know what to say. I say we just move on and hit to some quarries. Let's get to some quarries.
So as you said in the start, Riley, oh look, rocks. And you know what the Doctor did remember to do in this story? Check the radiation meter.
Ah.
So at least they take radiation pills right at the beginning.
See, Terry Nation, he's adjusting. He is developing that one script that he keeps rewriting. He's just working on it piece by piece.
Hey. So let's talk about the setup here. We have the return of the old sound effects for Skaro from the very first Dalek story. They're wandering around on this planet that's made from 2 quarries, so +2 to the quarry.
2.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the rock one and then there's the sand dune one. So those are 2 separate quarries. There's drilling going on, bunch of very disheveled people burying their dead, and then a spaceship shows up.
And digs its way into the ground. But before we get to that scene, I will point out my first disappointment with this serial. When the Doctor and Romana see the funeral procession go by, the people shuffling along, and they start talking about zombies, and they start mentioning, maybe it's a planet ruled by zombies. And then right then I said, oh, okay. I know it's Destiny of the Daleks, but let's go for this. This sounds great, except that's not what's happening here at all.
No, they just look like zombies because they're so overworked and emaciated. Yeah.
So disappointment number 1.
Let's talk about the Doctor getting crushed by a giant beam.
You mean the foam beam?
Yes,
Yes.
Very clearly foam.
And that brings me to disappointment number 2. So I'm trying to find where in episode 1 was our departure point for like the setup is done, the plot is now moving forward. So we're all set up. Doctor gets pinned by a beam, tells Romana, gotta do this, gotta do that, go. And he brings out a book and starts reading. And I'm thinking, oh, all right, maybe this whole serial will be the Doctor pinned and him just having to save the day pinned, 127 hours kind of thing. But no, that isn't going to happen. It is quickly resolved. So disappointment number 2. As you see, I was jumping at these ideas of where this serial could go, and then it just reverts back to standard story.
Yeah, I think there are 2 things to talk about here. Firstly, that book he pulls out is The Origins of the Universe by Ulan Kalufid. Now, if Ulan Kalufid isn't a Douglas Adams sounding name, I don't know what is. And then when he is rescued by these absolute icons of DISCO.
It's either disco, and then they also had like the Egyptian eyeliner scheme going on, and it really weirded me out. What exactly are we trying to do here? And then the one guy, his hair had purple in it. Why? I don't know. But
why not, Julie?
Did.
Why not?
Anthony, you saw disco. Julie saw Egyptians. I don't know about you guys, but I clearly see an alien race that worships Rick James. And I do intend to try to make as many Rick James references as we continue our discussion.
Well, that might make this story a bit more enjoyable.
It really would. So they come around and he's in their little spaceship area, right?
Hang on, that doesn't happen till part 2. In parallel here, we have Romana being stalked.
By the person who we thought was a zombie, but we learned, as Anthony said, is just a overworked person. But I do give high praise to the performance there by Terrence Stamp. Excellent job.
Yeah, that's actually Tim Barlow, who actually does do a very good job in this story.
He does. He really does.
He really does. Now, Anthony, you told me that I was wrong, that we didn't get to the spaceship, but we did because the Doctor is very clearly whistling Colonel Bogey's March on their spaceship at the end of episode 1.
You're right.
And he asks, it's Skaro? And at that point, first off, we did this all incorrectly because we shouldn't have called it Destiny and the Daleks. We should not have mentioned Skaro. And if you had just ended this episode with them coming through the glass, oh, that would have been great. But no, we didn't do that, did we?
Mm-mm.
You're right, Julie. It is a wonderful visual. It is a great cliffhanger, having the Daleks burst through like the Kool-Aid Man, and it's completely ruined. There's no surprise there. Just imagine the surprise there would have been there if you had no idea. But
yeah,
all telegraphed. Shame. Shame on you, Terry Nation.
All right, so part 2. I actually really like that Romana is terrified of the Daleks.
I don't know that I do.
Well, you see, I think why I like it is because she's a Time Lord. She's heard of them. She knows a little bit about them. Unlike, for example, Sarah on seeing them in Death to the Daleks. She doesn't know jack shit about the Daleks. So it kind of makes sense to me that Romana is actually kind of scared of them.
I just find it unfortunate because our first introduction to this Romana is her kind of being a little weird with the Doctor and then crying. That's what I don't like about it. If it had been maybe the second or third story, fine. But so far, that's why I'm still not really warmed up to this Romana, and it's partially because of that.
I agree, Julie,
point.
because I feel similar. My focus was on the disappointment of not getting the Doctor Who version of 127 hours, because what we have here is that before we have a situation where it looks like The doctor is incapacitated, and Romana's going to have to do stuff. And literally just 10 damn minutes later, even less than that, it's completely flipped back to the standard service.
Mm-hmm.
Companion captured, doctor out and about trying to save the day. It's very disappointing.
Yeah.
But we do get a wonderful interrogation scene, which I thought was hilarious because I could not help but view the idea of the Daleks being quiz show hosts. It would have been wonderful. I know that Alec Trebek passed away and they were looking for a new host for Jeopardy. I think they missed their chance.
Amazing.
Oh, it'd be so beautiful. And so, of course, we get through that interrogation sequence. Oh, okay, we're doing great. What are the only thing that humans are good for? Subjugation. Great.
Yep.
Perfect. Love that. And I totally called it that she was going to play dead.
Yes.
That was very easy to figure out.
Well, particularly since they were so fascinated with the grave and the burial rites in that first episode. Yes. Very much so, Julie. I think that was pretty well signposted. But yeah, honestly, not a lot happens in this episode. There's a lot of kind of searching around the city as they're looking for Davros.
That's the reveal, though. We do have that. We have the reveal of their motives.
Early in the episode, I'm like, oh no, please don't tell me Davros is in this. And then 5 minutes later, there he is.
Yep, it's Davros. The only other notable thing is we do have the Doctor mocking the Daleks after climbing up the shaft. If you're the superior race of the universe, why don't you try climbing up after us?
That was brilliant. And I love how Terry Nation's like, I hate this. And I'm like, no, it's brilliant. I've been saying it for a very long time, for years. They can't even go up and down stairs. So yes.
It's one of the few good things about this story.
It's interesting to me that both of you were disappointed by the fact that Davros was in this. I did not know he would be in this. I obviously knew the Daleks would be in this. And then when the motivation for the Daleks came through, they want to find Davros, and there he is. That actually picked up my interest a little bit because I enjoy dialogues between the Doctor and Davros. It's so much more entertaining to me than the Doctor just going back and forth with the Dalek. So it's just a lot more fun, I think. And especially in this serial, when we have the hilariousness of the Doctor trying to escape with Davros in his little chair, his rolly chair, going all around, speeding around corners. It's hilarious as he's being kidnapped.
It does pick up a little in episode 3. I mean, we've even got, and let's just move into episode 3.
Yeah, episode 3.
We even have the Doctor offering Davros a jelly baby. Again,
oh, it's so good.
It's clearly a Douglas Adams edition.
Yes. Okay, so I will admit, I like the pushing around and everything, but my favorite thing so we get them into that room and there's the window. My first thought was, why don't we just chuck Davros out the window?
Wow.
Like, why are we keeping him alive at this point? Is it really all that important that we do? Because the Doctor even said earlier that he should have killed Davros when he had the chance. And I'm like, well, now's your chance.
Yeah.
I will point out that I have reached disappointment Mark 3 here because now this was a stretch for me. I know they wouldn't do this, but wouldn't it have been amazing if the Doctor and Romana and the humans with kidnapping Davros deactivated his, I guess, rolly chair, his power chair, so he was incapacitated, and they kind of did a Weekend at Bernie's thing where they had to pretend that they could pass by with him and like move his arm or move his mouth and stuff. I think that would have been great. These are the things I think about while watching Doctor Who.
Love that. Let's talk about that little standoff between the Doctor and the Daleks with Davros and the explosive, because firstly, we get the Doctor comparing Davros to Napoleon. Brilliant. Here for that. Davros actually explains his survival. We at least get an explanation there. Later, I'll explain later, whether it's Davros or the Master or whomever. Oh, you survived certain death last episode? How did that happen? I'll explain later. Great. And we have what is apparently my favorite Tom fluff, like a Billy fluff, where when he's threatening Davros with the explosive, he goes to say, stay back or back off, and merges the two, and we get the magnificent spack off. Which sounds quite rude.
wonderful. I mean, he kind of is. So let's be fair. I
Sorry, that just hit. Wow, Julie. Wow.
You're welcome. So I find it interesting. The Mavellans, what's that?
Mavellans.
Yes, Mavellans.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to get to their motivation, and when you're not quite entirely sure what they are, it's to destroy the whole planet and take the Doctor. That sounds like a very weird motivation, right? Why do we need the Doctor? And then obviously we find out, but even then it still doesn't make sense to me. This whole one person comes in is going to be able to fix this issue that you have. It just doesn't sound right to me. Just changing like a little bit of code. I don't know.
That's more of a part 4 discussion, but we can get into it now if you like, because I agree with you, Julie. I was a bit lost by the idea, and I think this is what they were trying to say. In a basic strategy game like rock, paper, scissors, which they used.
Yeah. Sorry,
often.
I jumped the gun here a little bit.
Yeah, while we're here, let's do it. Rock, paper, scissors. 2 machine minds fighting each other in rock, paper, scissors. I guess the concept is that they would... Well, there is no strategy to rock, paper, scissors. There can be, but at least it has to start with some loss or some winning before you can understand what your opponent is doing. So if they're being so logical, I don't understand what the non-logical or the non-computer viewpoint is that you can add to rock, paper, scissors to make your success rate higher. That I'm lost on.
I think rock, paper, scissors was probably the wrong thing to use just because it's not necessarily a game of logic.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry, I got a little ahead of us.
That's fine. Well, we do get that signposted quite a lot in episode 3.
Yes.
As the Doctor is making his threats, the Daleks are really showing their reliance on logic. I mean, they're saying, yeah, of course you won't blow Davros up because you will blow yourself up too. And it's Davros who has to intervene and say, just agree to his terms. He is not a logical being. I thought that was a nice little kind of pre-showing on the logical conundrums they're facing and why they need Davros. So it's signposted well. And then on the flip side, when Romana tells the Mavellans that the Doctor is an absolute genius with reference to robotics, they perk up as well. Very clear positioning here that the two are looking for an advantage in this war.
And it was one of those situations where I didn't quite get that they were robots at the time, but I thought that they wanted Davros for some other reason. And that's where I was like trying to figure out exactly what they would want him for, because I thought they would want to, again, use like Davros to their advantage, not necessarily from a just to rewrite some code, but from an actual other perspective. I don't know. One thing I will say is I miss the Daleks with blue balls. Yeah, just gonna throw that out there. And again, my newer dog is the one who's starting to dislike the things. So yeah, the beeping of the Nova device.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Bandit did not like that.
Before we get to the Nova device, I want to talk about the slave workers getting executed.
Yes, that is a very, very good scene because I can't recall a scene in Who recently, in our watch through that was so jarring, I guess would be the word to use. Brutal.
They killed a lot of people in this story.
Can we also talk about how some of those actors are the worst to have ever graced our screens in Doctor Who? Because the way they die is like, oh yeah, I'm just going to slowly lie down as if I'm about to take a nap. What fucking drama school did these guys go to?
Is it better or worse than Planet of Evil? Because Planet of Evil, it was the opposite direction. It was the...
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I got battered by something and I'm going to throw myself on the floor and scream. And I still don't like that either.
I think I'd rather have Planet of Evil.
What's interesting, you say that too, though, from the miners' perspective, it didn't work. But when it was the Mavellans, when it was them who were falling, I was like, that's really clever because they're robots.
That did work for them. But the slave workers, no. That was really bad. Really bad. Anyway,
so the Nova device. Yes. And this is where you truly see that the Mavellans were absolutely cold-blooded.
Yeah, they are not here to play.
Right.
So this device, they've got it in this shielding to test it. And if activated outside of the shielding, it would burn up the atmosphere of the planet. And then they lock Romana in there with the Nova device.
It's insane.
It's brutal.
Yes.
And that's our cliffhanger. The Doctor can't get her out, and that takes us into episode 4. We have a long recap. Julie's already annoyed by this episode.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Same thing with going into part 2, but yes. But what I liked about this one is at the end of it, and it counts all the way down, and it didn't actually kill Romana, and at least one of the ladies was just like, well, it didn't make sense to kill her. We just needed to draw the Doctor out. And I was like, wow, all right.
Yeah, I think that was a Geller. I like a Geller.
Mm-hmm.
She's cool.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about Davros, because he has a very high opinion of himself.
No shit.
He tells the Daleks that his safety is their primary concern and everything else is irrelevant. He's annoyed by the title of Supreme Dalek and says he plans to dispute that title most vigorously. Do we think that maybe Davros is a little bit of an analogue for Terry Nation? He is the creator of the Daleks.
Hey, I like this.
Everyone else, fuck you.
So now, because I never knew what Terry Nation looked like to begin with, now he's just going to look like Davros. Perfect.
Sure.
I like that theory. I like that theory a lot.
I'll show you what he looks like, Julie. I'll send you a picture.
Again, we hit this whole logical impasse thing, right?
Yes.
And then also the comment that was made, this isn't a direct quote, so forgive me, but basically you have two forces attacking each other. If they're too logical, then it's actually going to be like full. And that doesn't seem to be what's happening here. So I question that part of that theory.
Well, it's not peaceful at this point, but the battle fleets are locked at an impasse because neither can outthink the other. So what we're seeing on the ground is different from what's happening with their battle fleets, I guess.
I thought they said that not a single shot had been fired yet because they just keep over-strategizing, waiting for the best moment to strike, and that's why nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but that was my take from it, which it's difficult for me because I feel like we had a similar version to this concept, or a version of this concept, in just the last serial.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we did.
So it's just, man, it's just disappointing.
Yeah, it's not good. Not good, Alan.
But, on a good point, we discussed the Movellans, and when they are now being disabled, because that's the other thing that's happening in part 4. We have the Doctor and Romana dealing with the logical game, yada, yada, yada. But the Movellans are slowly getting taken out and overcome by the prisoners. And you're right. The way they go down, I thought it was very interpretive dance when they would kind of twirl and go down. But that was really, really good. And I liked that element of it, because if we were just stuck in there doing the rock, paper, scissors thing for any longer, I think I would have lost my damn mind.
That said, in the rock, paper, scissors thing, we do get another jelly baby. So that's 2 for the episode.
That we do.
All right, Dalek Suicide Squad.
Yeah, pretty much.
So have the Daleks not realized that Davros really doesn't actually give a shit about them? They have brought Davros back to be their savior, and all he's doing is sending more and more of them to their destruction.
To be fair, when their whole goal is to win, and this would allow them to win, that's how he's able to do it. Again, I'm not saying that Davros is good, but I'm just saying that's why they would fall into that trap.
Do the ends justify the means, though?
I don't think the Daleks care about that.
Depends on how many casualties they have in the process.
Yeah, because I don't know how a Dalek feels as themselves as an individual. I don't know all that. I haven't really asked them to see, do they feel like their work environment is good for them? If they get enough time off? I don't know.
I would love to see a comedy skit of the Dalek HR department. Let's get the Dalek Army People Survey out there with the immortal question of, and this was actually asked on the annual survey at one of my former companies, of, do you have a best friend at work?
I've never seen that question on anything from work.
Oh, we used to mock it relentlessly.
All right, the miners. So we talk about how many of them die?
Quite a lot.
It's most of them. They disable all of the Movellans. Okay, great. Most of the Daleks get destroyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool, great. And most of the miners die. You have 5 people left. it's crazy. I don't know. It feels very Third Doctor. Is that when they all died? Second or Third Doctor? One of those two.
Yeah, we've had a number of stories where almost everyone dies. And it's always brutal when we do come across it. But there are a lot of things in this that kind of feel very late era Third Doctor. And I think it is the Terry Nation factor. It is a lot of death to the Daleks. Crossed with Planet of the Daleks. Terry Nation bingo. We'll bring back the Terry Nation bingo card. How about that?
We also had putting something over the eyepiece.
Yep.
So they can't see. Like, come on. It's like, Terry Nation, if you wrote that yourself, you're already announcing the fact that you understand that there's some flaws to the Daleks because, oh, hey, they have one single eyepiece and they don't have arms in which to help themselves.
Yeah. Well, Julie mentioned the hat over the Dalek eye stalk, so that's how the Doctor dispatches of the Dalek guarding Davros, I guess. And yeah.
Then the Daleks go boom.
Daleks go boom boom.
So many. So many.
Yeah, the death count in this is huge. Absolutely huge. Meanwhile, we have one last Mavellan crawling to activate the Nova device. And this poor Mavellan, I mean, I realize it's trying to kill everyone, but Romana stops it and lops off its arm. That's a badass move from Romana.
Yeah, it is. This serial is strange. You're right, it's stuck in Terry Nation bingo with just glimpses of something else peeking around the corner, but you don't get much of it, and that's part of it right there. Something like that, and wish there was more.
Yeah. So Davros gets carted off to stand trial. He's frozen.
Right, that little thing they put him in, it just looks really funny to me. He just feels so trapped.
He does, doesn't he? He does. And then I want to talk about that last scene, the Doctor and Romana moving rocks. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there are scenes where literally there are these giant boulders and Tom Baker's just like picking it up, lifting it over his head and throwing it. Like, is this deliberately taking the piss? I would argue yes. I think it very much is.
Yeah.
Or they're adding a new power to the Doctor that wasn't there before.
No.
I think they're taking the piss.
Would agree. It's just kind of weird. And then I like how then the Doctor tries to say, well, how would you solve this whole thing? And it's the make mistakes to confuse the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the General Melchett advice in Blackadder. Bursts out of the trenches and walks slowly towards the enemy. We've done that 5 times in a row, and that's why they won't suspect it this time.
If you've got logical beings and they see a mistake that's made, they will take that mistake and do whatever they absolutely can with that mistake.
Yes, they will punish you. Obviously, this was written at a time where people had not played strategy games against computers before.
Yeah. All right. I think we've milked this one as much as we can.
Just like Terry Nation does.
Yes, just like Terry Nation does. God, I'm glad we're done with him.
Oh, wait, is this it?
This is it. This is his last contribution to the show.
Sorry, Terry Nation, you didn't go out with a bang.
If only he'd gone out with Genesis of the Daleks.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's talk about some of our metrics. So we have 2 on the query, 2 on the Jelly Baby. I didn't get any instances, but I'll explain later. And I do feel that the Mavellans deserve some camp count points simply for their
outfits,
Yeah.
overall style. I was gonna say 2.
1.5.
1.5? 1.5 for the Mavellans. Okay. All right. So let's score this one. And Riley, you have the privilege of going first.
To sum up, disappointment. Disappointment in all the directions I thought this could go. Disappointment of changing up Mary Tam to Lola Ward without any explanation, really. K9 being sidelined. Romana immediately being captured. Terry Nation bingo. A lot of things to be disappointed. What's the good side? There's some good bits of humor. There are some interesting shots. The cliffhanger shot at the end of episode 1 was quite lovely. There's glimpses there. I feel like they're boxed in by Terry Nation, but that's all over and done with. I think there's potential moving forward. I hope it will be better in the future, but this one is meh. Just meh. So I'm going to give it 5 super freaks out of 10.
Julie, what have you got?
There's a lot that I agree with from Riley, right? The lack of explanation and the lack of storytelling around the regeneration of Romana really disappointed me. And her getting sidelined and relegated to crying, while yes, I understand she knows the Daleks, was disappointing to me as an introduction to a new actor as a companion. I didn't really get the story, to be perfectly honest. I thought the whole logical computers playing chess thing was just a bit of a stretch for me, because yes, while I think the Daleks are logical, I also think that they work on anger as well, and that would take out that pure logic, to be perfectly frank. I think there's some good. I think the humor does stand out, and yes, that is pretty much all going to have to do with who our script editor is now, and I just think that this is not great. So I'm going to give this 4.5 burial rocks out of 10.
So, I got this story on VHS, Christmas 1994.
Aww.
I was 7, and 7-year-old me fucking loved this story.
7-year-old, you had problems.
7-year-old me saw explosions and Daleks. 36-year-old me sees a lot of issues with this story. And you in particular, Julie, in the past have accused me, I think, of letting childhood nostalgia cloud my judgment. And what I will say is, good God, childhood nostalgia did not give way to anything on this story. This was actively bad. This was dated from a plotting perspective, so filled with NationTropes that it's actually quite boring. And I just spent most of my time watching it kind of wanting it to be over. I will say there are a couple of good things going for it. Firstly, I do love the disco design of the Movellans. It's very dated. It's very 1978, 1979, but it's kitschy and I kind of like it. I also think Tim Barlow did a really good job as Tyson, so some props for that. Otherwise, probably not the best story to introduce a new companion with. The new Davros, I don't rate. He's not as good as Michael Wisher, and he's not as good as the Davroses we'll get in future. He is probably the worst Davros we've had, and unfortunately, the actor knows that and talks about it in interviews. So I feel bad for him because it's not really his fault, but he's just not as good as the others. I don't think highly of this one. Terry Nation seems to have forgotten that the Daleks are organic mutants within a casing and seems to have decided that they're robots at this point. So that's very weird. So yeah, this just isn't very successful for me. And I think my childhood nostalgia for this story leads to more disappointment than I think the two of you had from watching it. So for me, this just gets a lowly 3.5 spack-offs out of 10. Which gives us a story average of 4.33. We have not had a lower season opener since the Dominators.
Ooh.
Yikes.
So that's bad. Yeah, there we go. There we have it. Disappointment all round. We will be back next time when we'll be talking about City of Death, which hopefully we'll find a lot better than this shit show. In the meantime, as always, dear listener, thank you so very much for listening. And of course, until next time, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Riley Schreck, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, Chuck Davros Out the Window, was recorded on Wednesday the 16th of July 2024. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, I am so incredibly grateful to all of you for bearing with me on this episode. When we recorded this, I was so incredibly jet lagged, having been back from the UK for less than 48 hours.